government is using force to make people do things they don't want, okay, it must be having more negatives than positives, but that's the consequential conclusion. So my view is that these are two different languages for analyzing the same set of issues, not fundamentally different approaches. Now that being said, I like the consequential language better. I think it's calmer. It doesn't seem like just an assertion. It allows for reasonable disagreement because you can have different discussions with different people about some policy versus others, about some policies being really good and some really bad, because some have a huge amount of negatives relative to positive, and some maybe it's not so clear. It makes, the consequential approach makes it explicit what the differences are about. It forces everyone on different sides to say, well, I like this policy because it does X, Y, and Z. And someone who doesn't like the policy will say, I don't like it because I think it does A, B, and C. But then they can look at their different charts and they can say, well, actually, I don't agree with you that this is something that's happened by policy. Or I don't agree with you that this is a negative of policy. Okay? And then you potentially can have a conversation in which you could move closer to agreement. The philosophical view just says, we, the philosophicals, are right, you're wrong, and you have to do everything our way. I don't think that's persuasive. Okay, so I advocate in the book for consequential libertarianism. I discuss the relation with philosophical libertarianism. Now, where does this all lead? Well, I've outlined a whole set of policies already. It suggests being suspicious of all kinds of interventions. So let me illustrate with one example. As you know, most countries prohibit a broad range of allegedly dangerous substances like marijuana, cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and so on. And the ostensible justification for prohibition is that we're reducing the use of drugs, in particular reducing the misuses, the abuses of drugs and the associated drugs. The consequential libertarian view has two main responses. Response has two main components. First, when you look at the evidence doesn't make a very good case that prohibition actually reduces the amount of drug use. It suggests that prohibitions reduce drug use a little bit, but not very much. And in particular, it suggests that what prohibition does is discourage otherwise responsible, reasonable people from using drugs in moderation, and does almost nothing to discourage irresponsible people from using drugs, okay, not in moderation, abusing drugs. So it's affecting exactly the wrong people. It's discouraging the people who wouldn't generate any harm to anyone else from their drug use, and not affecting the people who may indeed be generating harm through their drugs. So the alleged benefit of drug prohibition, okay, based on the evidence, seems to be quite modest. It's really not doing very much, okay, in order to promote its goal. So that already should make us suspicious. Second, the consequential or economic analysis of prohibition, going back to what I was talking about at the beginning, says that prohibition causes most of the negative things that people inaccurately attribute to the drugs themselves. Prohibition creates violence because in an underground market, the participants can't resolve their disputes with lawsuits, with advertising. They resolve their disputes with guns. Prohibition increases crime because the elevated prices encourage people to steal in order to be able to afford their drug dealers. Prohibition leads to corruption because there's more scope for bribing police when there's a bigger underground market. Prohibition makes quality control difficult. People don't know what they're buying nearly as much as if it were a legal product like alcohol. So users of drugs get much worse health effects than they would get if they were getting legal versions of the same goods. Prohibition encouraged the U.S. and other countries to intervene in Colombia and Peru and Afghanistan, where we're allegedly trying to win the hearts and minds of the population. And how are we doing that? By going to their fields and burning their fields down, okay, in our pursuit of drug prohibition. Prohibition encourages restrictions on medicinal uses, so people who get benefits from smoking marijuana or using opiates to relieve pain don't get the opportunity to do that under prohibition. And prohibition generates disrespect for the law. It teaches everybody that laws are for suckers. Why? Because the vast majority of people who use drugs, who sell drugs, get away with it. And therefore, it emboldens everyone to think, I might as well disobey the law if I don't like it. So the consequential libertarian view says that even if you're concerned about the negatives of drug use, even if you're opposed to drug use on religious grounds, moral grounds, or anything else, legalization is still the right policy. Because legal prohibition is not having very much its main intended goal of reducing drug use, and it's causing all these other negative effects, which almost certainly swamp any beneficial effects. So we don't have to talk about rights, we don't have to talk about freedom, we don't have to talk about the philosophical assertion that I have the right to put whatever I want in my own body. If we just systematically look at the costs and benefits of prohibition, it becomes obvious that